Smoak.
Congratulations, Big Blue, Michigan, Jim Harbaugh. The Wolverines were better last night, and watching that game, a couple of things come to mind, and I'm exhausted from always winning predictions. Last night, I was the one that went with Michigan, and I say that in jest, but they did exactly what I was concerned about if I was Washington. They ran the ball down their throat, 300-plus yards, which makes you still wonder what in the hell Texas and Steve Sarkisian were doing in the semifinals. And then number two, they were getting to Penix. And I don't care who the quarterback is, Tom Brady or whoever, you get to them, they feel it, they're not as comfortable, and you could tell from the beginning he wasn't quite as comfortable.
Well, not getting sacked is one thing, and I guess that's a check mark in the box for Washington that he didn't really, but it's just as bad when you get pummeled physically like he did, and you saw him walking off the field. I mean, he was just in a lot of pain and, gutted through the last quarter of that game with probably several things that were hurting all at once, and then that last hit would just looked like it just punished him so badly. But Michigan was the most efficient team this year. They're the best team up front on both sides of the ball consistently all through the season. People like me had doubts about their ability to really hang with teams that were super athletic given their schedule, and they didn't really get challenged all that much. But really, you look back on it, and they were just better than everybody else.
From pretty much start to
finish, that's who they were, and they were dominant. And they because of their efficiency and the way that they play, make you pay for your mistakes much more than other teams do. So a team like Washington that can get a little wild sometimes, the team like Michigan makes them pay for their mistakes. Just like Alabama didn't have to pay for their mistakes until the week before, Michigan, because they're so painfully efficient and the little things, they do them all right. They don't have penalties. They don't have turnovers. They don't do those things. So when you don't have those opportunities against Michigan, it's going to be tough to beat somebody like that.
Congrats to the Michigan Wolverines on their national title. No asterisk. They went out and they earned that. I know there's going to be a lot of conversation in certain circles, but I'm just going to acknowledge what it is. They were the best team in college football after last night, and the best team wasn't in the playoffs, says Georgia fan or Ohio State fan or whoever, but Michigan could only play who was in front of them. They went out and beat every single one of the teams that they had to play. So they went unbeaten. They beat another unbeaten, and they did it convincingly last night. So it is a Big Blue celebration and a first-time in a long-time moment to watch last night, which was pretty cool if you kind of take out all the extra noise of just seeing that program, which hasn't experienced that type of success in almost 3 decades now at this point. That's a long time to go without a title. And so just kind of unique and cool to see that for the first time in such a long time and in the first time in this CFP era. So, that was a mildly entertaining game, somewhat entertaining game, a disappointing game, certainly from the Washington perspective. They didn't do what they needed to do to win the game. And I felt like yesterday I told y'all I had felt like Michigan was going to win, and then I just have felt here lately like I'm going to go with Washington. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to be able to connect on some big plays, that they're going to be able to slow down Michigan and the run game. And right out of the gates, Michigan's running all over them. I'm like, oh, God, I could not have been further off on that. But they actually stemmed that off after a while. They actually played pretty well defensively throughout the rest of that game after the start was so rough, getting down 14-0. But the biggest thing to me that didn't happen wasn't not stopping the run, even though Michigan obviously piled up yardage. It was that they didn't hit on their big plays. They did not connect on any of the big play opportunities. Down the field, Michael Penix was just not accurate because he was either hurt or getting pressured or just not making the right throw or making the best throw. And you can chalk that up to all the reasons I mentioned or whatever other reasons you want to chalk that up to, but it just wasn't their night. They did not play the sharpest game, and Michigan deserves a lot of credit for why that was. I also think the combination of Washington not playing their best game was the double whammy, and that led to a game that Michigan pretty much controlled throughout. Jumped out early, obviously. Washington made that little bit of a comeback, and you're like, all right, bam, we're off to the races. Here we go. And then they could just not get over that hump. And so, credit to the Wolverines. A definite night for Washington Huskies fans out there where you're like, dang, man, I wish this could, I wish that, I wish this, and why did we or why wasn't that? And that's going to be tough to live with, but it was a great run for them still regardless. And I just wish it was a little bit more of a competitive game, but there was some moments there that that was fun, and the better team did win at the end of the day.
I thought that maybe midway or so, late third quarter, it was still 20-13, whatever the score was. And I thought, Penix is going to hit one of those looping long passes down the sideline, and he did to a doozy, and yet it was a Dunze, but he was called back because of holding, and it was a pretty good grab. Here's a stat about Michigan football that is mind-boggling. Throughout 15 games this year, they had 5 offensive turnovers. Now, that I don't know how many muff punts or whatever, because they did 5. 5. Some teams had multiple games of 5. They also were penalized on average 3 times per game over 15 games. Now, there were many times when they dictated the game so early and then they could just not take a lot of risk and not. But, you get a pass interference, a holding, 45 penalties, 5 offensive turnovers is about, from Cole Kublik, that's about as good a stat as you could have. How are you going to be good? Those are 2 reasons you can be pretty good.
Oh, Jim Harbaugh did what he set out to do and brought his team back to prominence, and it's through things like that, the little things. That's why, when whatever changed after the Connor Stallions information came out, Michigan didn't miss a beat because they're already set up. Like, that was... It just kind of proved they didn't really need to do that. They were that good. But, that was kind of the cherry on top of their, the information they had. But they were just so efficient and so strong up front that you don't have the problems that other teams have. And because of that, you can sift through your coach being suspended for half of the regular season. And you can sift through all these other things because everything was set up so well and the team was so in lockstep with each other. I mean, they just didn't have moments of panic, really, during the year.
They handled Ohio State, even though that wasn't easy. They handled their business there. They had, a game earlier this year against Bowling Green where they messed up a lot as far as turnovers, but they just pretty much were, from start to finish, a buzzsaw. And they were, for the most part, for most of last night. I never felt like Washington threatened them, even when it was 20-13 and Michigan was starting to have to not be able to move the ball as well and got away from the run as they started throwing the ball a lot more than I ever thought they would.
They should have had way more than 45 penalties just based on some missed calls last night. There were a couple in there that you're like, how did that not get called? But that wasn't the deciding factor in the game, I don't believe. But there were some moments there where you're like, that's not far from the ref, and the jersey's clearly being yanked, so... there were some things like that, but again, that did not affect the outcome. When I see that 45 penalties all season, I was like, there should be 47 or 48 probably watching that game last night. But, it is what it is, and they went out and they took it, and they earned it. And I know there's, again, there's always going to be a segment of people who are going to, it's a national championship. There is no asterisk. They're the champs. They're going to be in the almanacs and the record books and the websites and whatever else you're going to go to when it says 2023. It's going to be the Michigan Wolverines, and they went out and they beat Alabama, and they went out and they beat an undefeated Washington team and beat everybody that was in front of them and in their way. So tip of the cap to that defense, to Blake Corum and that running game. J.J. McCarthy is one of the most just their quarterbacks of all time. I mean, he really, you forget that he's even there. Am I wrong? I mean, as far as having to make plays, until he makes a play, the big first down run, and you're like, oh, there's J.J. McCarthy, because they just played defense and ran the ball, and he had to do just handle it. Not that he's what do you call it? What's the phrase?
Bus driver?
Yeah,
he's a bus driver, but he kind of is in so many ways, but he just doesn't have to be the guy like Penix had to be the guy,
Yeah.
And so he was able to just be a part of that overall team effort, where with Washington, you felt like they needed guys to jump out and make plays, and they just didn't get that last night.
He's kind of like a 70-year-old man's iPhone. Look, he's not using all the apps. They're not using all the apps, but you can still call him.
Yeah.
Let me tell you this, though. The run he made when they were down inside their own 10, that he broke away and went for about 15 to 25, whatever it was a back-breaking play. He threw the ball a lot better. There were times when it looks like he was erratic, but he threw the ball a lot better because they could run the ball. Anyone could throw the ball. But there were a couple of plays on that drive because, the next, I think, snap, he went 10 or 12 yards for a first down. He's got that moxie in him.
Yeah.
And was really, really good.
But I was just thinking from, a typical national championship matchup, I'm just so used to us going Michael Penix and Trevor Lawrence and like all these big time quarterbacks. And JJ McCarthy is going to be mentioned with big time quarterbacks, but he's just not that like the Heisman Trophy winner. You know what I mean? But he's very good at his role on that team, and he's not a bus driver because I feel like that's a negative kind of a term. He's a better player than that, and his feet came up huge in that game last night. But I was just sitting there thinking of like, I can't remember the last quarterback on a big-time team who I just didn't think about as much during the course of a game, is what I'm getting at. Because you're thinking about the defense or Corum or
who was
or
more
others.
of an effective person for their offense, and this is from Paxton, J.J. McCarthy or Stetson Bennett?
I mean, Stetson Bennett put up bigger numbers, but they asked him to do different things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of splitting hairs there. I don't know. I guess you're like what Paul said. You're asking them to do different things, and I don't mean that as a slight on JJ McCarthy.
No.
It's just that I just forget about him until he made the plays that he made because they were just so efficient doing what they were doing, running the football and throwing it around when they needed to, but just playing solid defense. And he has an electric personality, and it's easy to see why he's a fan favorite and why that team is able to play so well off him and with him, and just that team seems like it gets along. And obviously they've been through a heck of a lot together. So despite the fact that there's some people who immensely dislike the head coach or other facets of that, there's a lot of really likable guys on that team. And I was happy to see a Blake Corum or a JJ McCarthy be able to celebrate that regardless of all the other noise. And man, certainly deserving of it. Put on a really nice performance last night.
And it was also good for Edwards to blow open what has been kind of a frustrating year for him. Those 2 holes that he ran through after bouncing outside were phenomenal. Here is.